Now, as a sociologist, my attempt is to give fraternity a concrete implementation. That is, I try to translate into real social forms, into social practice, the concept, the general concept of fraternity. So the way in which we can make fraternity concrete as a social practice is to translate it into relational goods. So my presentation is about the concept and the practice of relational goods, of course, with reference to Pope Francis' encyclical. Now, the topics of my presentation are the following. Fraternity is the third beyond lib and lab, where lib stands for liberal, the market, and lab stands for labor, that is the state, freedom and equality. And our political as well as economic systems are fundamentally based upon a compromise between the market and the state. They are lib-lab systems. So fraternity is an alternative, I would say a third pillar, different from the lib and the lab, which changes the whole system, the whole structure of the market and the state. Second point, fraternity from a relational perspective leads to a new vision of the good life. Fraternity is a vision of a good life. And then I ask myself, what are relational goods? What is the operative definition of relational goods? And how the concept of relational good redefines the map of common goods. So I conclude by defining fraternity in terms of relational goods. Fraternity is the third. Modern society was built on the basis of the principles of individual freedom and equality between individuals, putting aside the principle of fraternité. This society leads to self-defeat. A lib-lab system is self-defeating. Freedom and equality require the third, that is fraternity, otherwise they fall into lib-lab systems which generate inequalities and threaten fundamental human rights. So the third, the fraternity, understood as an interpersonal relationship between two or more subjects, is expressed and made concrete in a specific type of goods, what we call relational goods. Now, it is important to underline that fraternity is not an outcome emerging from the interactions between freedom, lib, and equality, lab, but it is an autonomous and sui generis third, which has its own origins that are not found either in the market or in the state, but in the life worlds of civil society. Now, I have not enough time to get into the relational perspective, which is really dominating both Pope Benedict and Pope Francis' magisterium. I just quote from Caritas in Veritate and from Fratres Omnes 2 sentences, but in my paper there are very many quotations which wish to demonstrate that these popes, in continuity between each other, they have a very deep relational understanding of society. The first quote from Caritas in Veritate: "It will be possible to experience and to steer the globalization of humanity in relational terms, in terms of communion and the sharing of goods." Now, the notion of sharing of goods is implicitly calling for relational goods. And from Fratres Omnes: "For Christian thought and for the action of the Church, the primacy given to relationship is a vocation of all. The primacy given to relationship to the encounter with the sacred mystery of the other, to universal communion with the entire human family, is a vocation of all. This primacy given to relationship is at the bulk, at the core of what I call relational goods. At stake is the conception of what a good life is all about. The relational perspective involves a clear distinction between two conceptions of the good life: hedonic idea, that is avoiding pain and getting pleasure, and the eudaimonic idea, which means flourishing of human virtues. Now, it's clear in my argument that pursuing the eudaimonistic idea of the good life means creating and sharing relational goods. We need to reformulate the Aristotelian perspective, since we live in a society conceived as a field of new opportunities. We must point out two main differences with Aristotle. For Aristotle, the relational goods are not a discrete, in our society, relational goods are not a discrete number of goods, as Aristotle maintained, but the way of pursuing all the social goods, from the family to the international relations. The relational good does not depend on the political system, on the polis, as Aristotle maintained, but on those who participate in it. So the discriminating factor of living well, the good life, becomes the relational or non-relational nature of the good that is sought and implemented by the acting subjects. What are the relational goods? I present here very synthetically the definitions by Martha Nussbaum and then by Carol Ulaner, who defined in a way relational goods. Now, Martha Nussbaum, following Aristotle, identifies three relational goods: friendship, love, and political commitment, and considers them from a moral perspective, not from a sociological or political or economic perspective. Moreover, she considers relational goods as part of external or exterior goods, those that are outside the body and the soul, which are as wealth, fame, or power. So basically, Nussbaum offers a rather restricted and limited vision of relational goods, owing to the fact that she uses the Aristotelian notion of relation, which is inadequate for understanding the nature of relational goods in contemporary societies. In short, Nussbaum is important, but she does not present a theory, a general theory of relational goods that can be generalized. The second scholar, which I mentioned, in terms of interest for the definition of relational goods, is Carol Ulaner. Now, she has a mainly political approach to relational goods. For her, goods arise as a function of a relationship with others and can only be possessed by mutual agreement that they exist after appropriate joint actions by persons and non-arbitrary others. She wanted to understand why and in what way individuals actively participate in political life, avoiding the free rider. And she found the answer in a model centered on the rational choice of individuals. So it's on the lib side, who want to produce a certain common result, but by mobilizing themselves within groups that are bearers of political demands. Hence the limits of her theory. I don't get into the details because I have no time. So in Ulaner's theory, the equation relational good as a joint action is a function of the relations that are attractive for utility or expressiveness is an aggregate outcome. it's a bandwagon effect of many people sharing a relation that is a useful and attractive good to them. While I conceive of relational good as an emergent effect of a peculiar network between people. So I give my definition of relational good. A relational good is a sort of common good that depends on the relations put into action by subjects towards each other and can be enjoyed only if they orient themselves accordingly. So human life is the object of enjoyment and therefore of rights, not as a private good of the single individual, nor as a public good in the modern technical sense, as an impersonal good ensured by the state, but precisely as a common good of the subjects that are in relation. So it's very close to the social doctrine, the social teaching of the church. This good, this relational good, must be defined not as a function of individual experiences singularly, that is privately or collectively taken, but as a function of their relations. So what I want to stress is the role of relations in defining the good we are talking about.
3 minutes. Thank you.
How many minutes I have, Stephen?
Three.
Okay, so the operative definition of the relational good is that they are goods of human sociability, crucial goods for the very existence of society, which could not survive without them. If these goods are ignored, rejected, or repressed, the entire social fabric comes to be impoverished, mutilated, deprived of its lifeblood, with grave damage to persons and the overall social organization. So in this figure, I just want to distinguish the public good from the private good, and in between them, there are the relational goods, which are primary relational goods in the family and informal networks, and secondary relational goods of associative nature in civil society, that is the third sector and pro-social private associations. So we can measure the relational good, but in essence, we can define as it's written in this slide. Relational goods are those immaterial entities, intangible goods, like fraternity, which is an intangible good, that consist of the social relations that emerge from subjects that are reflexively oriented toward producing and enjoying together in a shared manner a good that they could not obtain in any other way, a good that they could not obtain in any other way. So the concept of relational good redefines the map of common goods. The relational good is a common good, but not all common goods are relational. The public goods, for instance, are common, but they are not relational. So the criterion, so 2 minutes, Stephen. Yeah. My 20 minutes, two minutes more. The criterion for identifying the common good as a relational good is based on the principle of positive reciprocity and not that of equality of individual opportunities. To say that a good is common means that it is a relational good and that it is a type of good that depends on the relation put in place by the subjects vis-a-vis each other and can be enjoyed only if they orient themselves in consequence of it. Final argument, relational goods such as mutual trust, cooperation, solidarity, peace, social friendship are created through social relations inspired by the principle of reciprocity. With a warning, reciprocity is not to be understood as a relationship of utility. It is not a do ut des, but as the social rule that supports a symbolic mutual exchange of goods having a subsidiary and supportive character. Now, reciprocity makes the virtue of charity social, that is relational. It translates personal, inner charity into social relations. And finally, fraternity in practice. On a practical level, fraternity is a relationship that leads to the extension of personal, that is individual charity, to a wider social network as a relational good by practicing reciprocity as a mutual support between people. I think that in the encyclical, this idea is at the core of it, and I wanted to explain why fraternity can be implemented in concrete terms through relational goods. Thank you very much.